of a project and project appraisal. Mr. Speaker, in view of the limited fiscal space, the government will embark on rationalizing the existing portfolio of projects being implemented by the national government and issue regulations for managing public investment. The government has developed the Public Investment Management Information System, which is expected to be a repository of all projects implemented by the national and county governments. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to the highlights of the government's spending priorities in the coming financial year. In light of the revenue challenges and significant expenditure demands, spending in the financial 2022-2023 will focus on supporting economic recovery and the Big Four agenda to ensure the highest impact on the well-being of Kenyans. The proposed total program spending for the financial year 2022-2023 amounts to Kenya shilling 3.3 trillion. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, the government is implementing the third economic stimulus program of Kenya shilling 30.1 billion to accelerate the pace of economic growth and sustain the gains realized so far. To further enhance the ongoing interventions, I propose a total of Kenya shilling 20.6 billion in this budget support implementation of various activities. Mr. Speaker, out of this, Kenya shilling 2.1 billion is for the youth empowerment and employment creation under the Kazi Mtaani program, Kenya shilling 8.2 billion for improving educational outcomes, Kenya shilling 1.3 billion for improving health outcomes, Kenya shilling 5.8 billion for improving environment, water and sanitation facilities, Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for fertilizer subsidy, and Kenya shilling 1.6 billion for enhancing liquidity to business. Mr. Speaker, to support implementation of the projects and programs under the Big Four agenda, I have proposed a total of Kenya shilling 146.8 billion. Mr. Speaker, we have continued to strengthen our healthcare systems in our quest for universal health coverage. Better health outcomes depend on the availability, accessibility, and capacity of health workers to deliver quality services anchored on well-equipped and provisioned healthcare facilities. Towards this end, the government has implemented various initiatives laying ground for achieving the goal of 100% health insurance coverage. Key among these initiatives include the free maternity program dubbed Linda Mama, which currently benefits over 1 million mothers annually, increasing the total number of health workers in the public and private sector, investment in the health infrastructure, and development of a digital health platform to support effective monitoring of the health sector. In addition, the government enacted the NHIF Amendment Act, which provides for the establishment of a centralized healthcare provider management system to ensure efficient management and payment of claims, as well as data collection. Mr. Speaker, to further enhance realization of the universal health coverage, I propose to allocate Kenya shilling 146.8 billion to the healthcare sector to support the various programs aimed at improving healthcare outcomes. Of this amount, Kenya shilling 62.3 billion will fund activities and programs for the attainment to universal health coverage. Specific allocation for various activities and programs include Kenya shilling 7 billion for purchase of COVID vaccines and related expenditure, Kenya shilling 4.1 billion for free maternity health care, Kenya shilling 5.2 billion for the managed equipment services, as well as Kenya shilling 1.8 billion to provide medical cover for the elderly and severely disabled persons in our society. Mr. Speaker, to lower cases of HIV/AIDS, malaria and tuberculosis in the country, Kenya shilling 16.2 billion has been recommended for the purpose. To enhance vaccines and immunization program, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 5.2 billion. Mr. Speaker, to further improve health service delivery, Kenya shilling 18.1 billion has been proposed for the Kenyatta National Hospital, Kenya shilling 11.7 billion for the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, Kenya shilling 7.7 billion for the Kenya Medical Training Center, Kenya shilling 2.9 billion for the Kenya Medical Research Institute, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for the construction of Kenya National Hospital Burns and Pediatric Center, Kenya shilling 1.2 billion for for procurement of family planning and reproductive healthcare commodities. Kenya shilling 300 million for procurement of cyberknife radiotherapy equipment. Kenya shilling 1.3 billion for the construction of cancer center at Kisii Level 5 Hospital, and Kenya shilling 619 million for the procurement of equipment at the National Blood Transfusion Services. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, the government embarked on a plan to provide decent and affordable houses for Kenyans. This was envisaged to create additional jobs, provide market for manufacturers as well as suppliers, and raise the contribution of real estate and construction sector to GDP. To achieve this, government has been implementing policy and administrative reforms targeted at lowering the cost of construction and improving access to finance for affordable housing. The government has also mobilized resources to support construction of affordable housing units and social housing units. Building on the gains and to ensure success of this initiative, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 27.7 billion for the affordable housing program. The proposed allocation includes Kenya shilling 4.6 billion to Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company for enhancement of the company's capital, as well as for on lending to primary mortgage lenders, Kenya shilling 8.7 billion for construction of affordable housing units, as well as Kenya shilling 1.2 billion for construction of social housing units. Mr. Speaker, to support the Nairobi Metropolitan Services in reversing urban indignity in Nairobi County, Kenya shilling 200 million has been recommended for the Nairobi Metropolitan Services Improvement Project, and Kenya shilling 118.7 million for construction of footbridges. Other key allocations to the housing, urban development, and public park sector include Kenya shilling 5.9 billion for the Kenya Informal Settlement Development Project 2, Kenya shilling 700 million for construction of markets, Kenya shilling 1 billion for maintenance of government pool houses, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for the construction of housing unit for the National Police and Kenya Prison, Kenya shilling 700 million for the Kenya Urban Program. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 1.2 billion to support the Nairobi Bus Rapid Transport Project to offer an efficient and time-saving public transport. Mr. Speaker, implementation of the appropriate policies coupled with enhanced investments in the manufacturing sector has created a conducive business environment to support and protect local industries, generation of jobs, and improve livelihoods. Mr. Speaker, to further promote local industries, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 10.1 billion under the various implementing ministries, departments, and agencies. Out of these, Kenya shilling 1 billion will go to the Credit Guarantee Scheme to enhance access to affordable credit by micro, small, and medium enterprises in the manufacturing sector. And Kenya shilling 626 million for provision of finances to micro, small, and medium enterprises through the Kenya Industrial Estate. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed Kenya shilling 2.6 billion for Dongokundu Special Economic Zone, Kenya shilling 295 million for the development of the Special Economic Zone, Textile Park in Naivasha, Kenani Leather Industry Park, and at the River Textile Hub, Kenya shilling 50 million for the Freeport and Industrial Park Special Economic Zone in Mombasa. Other proposed allocations include Kenya shilling 410.4 million for the modernization of Rivertex, and Kenya shilling 3 billion for supporting access to finance and enterprise recovery. Mr. Speaker, in order to maximize the benefits from our cash crop, the government will make further investment towards the revival and enhancement of output. In this respect, Mr. Speaker, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 212.1 million for modernization of cooperative cotton ginneries, and a further Kenya shilling 250 million for cotton industry revitalization. Mr. Speaker, to equip our youth with essential training and internship opportunities, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 1.3 billion for the Kenya Industrial and Entrepreneurship Project, Kenya shilling 2.1 billion for the Kenya Youth Employment and Opportunities Project, Kenya shilling 500 million for industrial research laboratories, Kenya shilling 200 million for constituency industrial development centers. Mr. Speaker, as part of the Big Four agenda, the government is implementing measures and interventions to achieve food and nutrition security for all Kenyans. These measures include supporting large-scale production of staple food, expanding irrigation schemes, increasing access to agricultural inputs, and supporting smallholder farmers to sustainably produce and market various commodities. To further support programs under this pillar, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 46.7 billion in this budget. Out of this, Kenya shilling 4.2 billion will go to the National Agricultural and Rural Inclusivity Project, Kenya shilling 1.7 billion for the Kenya Cereal Enhancement Program, Kenya shilling 1.9 billion has been proposed for the Emergency Locust Response, Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for the National Value Chain Support Program, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for the Agricultural Sector Development Support Program 2, Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for the Small Scale Irrigation and Value Addition Project, and Kenya shilling 690 million for Food Security and Crop Diversification Project. Mr. Speaker, the government will further set aside Kenya shilling 2.7 billion for fertilizer subsidy to cushion farmers during the short range from October to December 2022. This is in addition to the Kenya shilling 3 billion allocated in the financial 2021-2022. Mr. Speaker, to improve livestock production, I propose Kenya shilling 500 million for free disease holding ground in Lamu. I also propose Kenya shilling 1.7 billion for the Kenya Livestock Commercialization Program and Kenya shilling 121 million for livestock production under Big Four initiative. Mr. Speaker, to promote sustainable utilization of the blue economy resources, I have proposed an allocation of 1.9 billion for the aquaculture business development project, Kenya shilling 2.8 billion for Kenya Marine Fisheries and Socioeconomic Development Project, Kenya shilling 1.3 billion for exploitation of living resources under the blue economy, Kenya shilling 1 billion for construction of fish processing plant in Lamu, Kenya shilling 270 million for coastal fisheries infrastructure development, Kenya shilling 210 million for rehabilitation of fish landing sites in Lake Victoria, Kenya shilling 204 million for aquaculture technology development and innovation transfers, and Kenya shilling 126.3 million for the development of the Blue Economy Initiative. Mr. Speaker, in order to increase agricultural production and enhance resilience to climate change risk in targeted smallholder farming and pastoral communities in Kenya, I have set aside Kenya shilling 147 million for the Climate Smart Agricultural Productivity Project, Kenya shilling 850 million to enhance drought resilience and sustainable livelihood, Kenya shilling 178 million towards ending drought emergencies in Kenya, and in addition, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 421 million for the livestock and crop insurance scheme to reduce the vulnerabilities of Kenyan farmers to diseases and natural disasters. Mr. Speaker, to ensure legitimacy of land ownership, I have recommended Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for processing and registration of title deeds, Kenya shilling 769 million for digitization of land registries, and Kenya shilling 130 million for construction of land registries. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations include Kenya shilling 90 million for revitalization of cotton industry, Kenya shilling 300 million for mitigation of fall armyworms, Kenya shilling 200 million for establishment of liquid nitrogen plant, Kenya shilling 200 million towards the embryo transfer project, and Kenya shilling 250 million for construction and refurbishment of the Leather Science Institute. Mr. Speaker, having highlighted expenditures under the Economic Stimulus Program and the Big Four agenda initiatives, I now turn to other proposed areas of expenditure in this budget that will support our path to sustainable and resilient economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to expand critical infrastructure in roads, rails, air, and seaports to create an enabling environment for economic recovery and employment creation. Towards this, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 212.5 billion to support construction of roads and bridges, as well as their rehabilitation and maintenance. Mr. Speaker, the standard gauge railway has presented a modern and efficient transport system that is safe, comfortable, and affordable for passengers and freights. To expand railway transport to the rest of the country, I have proposed Kenya shilling 18.5 billion for development of the standard gauge railway, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for railways metro lines, Kenya shilling 439 million for rehabilitation of locomotive, and Kenya shilling 264 million for development of ERP system for SGR. Mr. Speaker, to support production of reliable and affordable energy, I propose a total of KSH 91.5 billion, excluding the provision set aside under the B4 agenda initiatives. Out of this, KSH 62.9 billion will cater for transmission and distribution of power. KSH 18.5 billion for development of geothermal energy, KSH 9.3 billion for electrification of public facilities, and KSH 2 billion for development of nuclear energy, as well as exploration and mining of coal. Mr. Speaker, the security of our nation remains paramount and must be maintained to safeguard the considerable development gains. For this reason, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 317.8 billion to support operations of the National Police Service, Defense, and the National Intelligence Services. Mr. Speaker, the proposed allocations include Kenya shilling 128.4 billion for defense, Kenya shilling 46.4 billion for the National Intelligence Service, and Kenya shilling 122.2 billion for police and prison service, Kenya shilling 10.7 billion for leasing of police motor vehicles, and Kenya shilling 1 billion for police modernization program, Kenya shilling 1 billion for the National Communication and Surveillance System, and Kenya shilling 335 million for the equipment of the National Forensic Laboratory. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations include Kenya shilling 4.8 billion for medical insurance for the National Police Service and prisons, Kenya shilling 2.3 billion for the group personal insurance for the National Police Service and prisons, as well as Kenya shilling 1 billion for the National Integrated Identity Management System. Mr. Speaker, we are committed to provide access to quality education for our children and youth. This will indeed facilitate realization of their full potential and enable them effectively contribute to the development of the country. The allocation and efficiency in spending on education has been increased to improve outcomes. As a result, access to education at all levels has improved remarkably, as evidenced by the increased enrollment in the basic and tertiary institutions. To further improve education outcomes, I propose a total of Kenya shilling 544.4 billion to support programs in the education sector. Mr. Speaker, out of the proposed allocation, Kenya shilling 12 billion will cater for free primary education, Kenya shilling 2.5 billion for recruitment of teachers, Kenya shilling 64.4 billion for free day secondary school education, including insurance under the NHI for secondary school students, Kenya shilling 5 billion for examination fees waiver for grade 6, class 8, and Form 4 candidates, and Kenya shilling 1.96 billion for the school feeding program. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 1.2 billion for training of teachers on competency-based curriculum, and Kenya shilling 310 million for the digital literacy program and ICT integration in our secondary schools. Mr. Speaker, to support transition from primary education to junior secondary school education under the competency-based curriculum, Kenya shilling 4 billion has been set aside for the construction of classrooms to support school infrastructure development and ensure safe learning in our schools. I have proposed allocation of 2.8 billion for primary and secondary schools infrastructure, and Kenya shilling 1.8 billion for construction and equipping of technical training institutes and vocational training centers. Further, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion has been set aside to increase access and improve the quality of technical and vocational education and training programs under the East African Skill Transformation and Regional Integration Project. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations in the education sector includes Kenya shilling 294.7 billion to Teachers Service Commission, Kenya shilling 91.2 billion for university education, Kenya shilling 15.8 billion to the Higher Education Loans Board, Kenya shilling 6.8 billion for Kenya Secondary School Education Quality Improvement Project, and Kenya shilling 5.2 billion capitation for TVET students. Further, Kenya shilling 527 million has been set aside for technical vocational education, training, and entrepreneurship. Kenya shilling 971 million for promotion of youth employment and vocational training, and Kenya shilling 323 million for the National Research Fund. Mr. Speaker, unleashing the productive potential of people living in poverty involves the removal of constraints through economic inclusion programs. In this respect, the government continues to support vulnerable groups through the Social Safety Net program, famously referred to as Inua Jamii. To continue protecting this vulnerable segment, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 39.5 billion for social protection and affirmative actions in this budget. Mr. Speaker, out of this allocation, Kenya shilling 17.5 billion will cater for cash transfers to elderly persons, Kenya shilling 7.9 billion for orphans and vulnerable children, and Kenya shilling 1.2 billion for persons living with severe disabilities. Mr. Speaker, the proposed allocation also includes Kenya shilling 5.1 billion for the Kenya Hunger Safety Net program, Kenya shilling 500 million for the National Drought Emergency Fund, Kenya shilling 2.6 billion for the Kenya Development Response to Displacement Impact Project, and Kenya shilling 2.8 billion for the Kenya Social and Economic Inclusion Project. In addition, Kenya shilling 933.8 million will go to the Child Welfare Society of Kenya, and Kenya shilling 400 million for the Presidential Bursary for the Orphans, and Kenya shilling 459 million for the National Development Fund for persons living with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, we acknowledge and support the critical role that youth and women play in nation building. The need for full and equal participation of youth and women across all spheres of the economy needs to be accelerated and sustained. To further empower the youth and support business owned by the youth, women and persons living with disabilities, I have recommended Kenya shilling 13.1 billion for the National Youth Service, Kenya shilling 2.2 billion for the Kenya Youth Empowerment and Opportunities Project, Kenya shilling 175 million for the Youth Enterprise Fund, Development Fund, Kenya shilling 170 million for the Women Enterprise Fund, and Kenya shilling 92 million for the Youth Empowerment and Enterprise Fund. Mr. Speaker, to promote regional equity, reduce poverty, and enhance social development, I have proposed Kenya shilling 44.3 billion for the National Government Constituency Development Fund, Kenya shilling 2.1 billion for the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, as well as Kenya shilling 7.1 billion for the Equalization Fund to finance programs in the previously marginalized areas. Mr. Speaker, we recognize the great opportunities that digital technologies offer in various sectors of the economy. Efficiently deployed, digital technologies have strong potential to accelerate economic recovery and improve livelihoods at relatively low cost for sustainable and inclusive development. For this reason, we have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 15.6 billion to fund initiatives in the information, communication, and technology sector. Specifically, this allocation includes Kenya shilling 620 million for government shared services. Mr. Speaker, the government is investing in the development of the Konza National Data Center and Smart City facilities. This National Data Center was commissioned in July 2021 and is currently hosting client services, including government agencies, and is a platform for the acceleration of innovation, particularly among the youth in Kenya. We encourage all MDAs to take advantage of this modern facility. Mr. Speaker, to fast-track the development of the Konza Technopolis City, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 5.2 billion for the horizontal infrastructure phase 1 and Kenya shilling 3.8 billion for Konza Data Center and Smart City facilities. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations include Kenya shilling 2.7 billion for maintenance and rehabilitation of last-mile connectivity network, Kenya shilling 1.2 billion for maintenance and rehabilitation of the National Optic Fiber Backbone Phase 2 expansion cable, and Kenya shilling 1.4 billion for installation and commissioning of Eldoret Nadapal fiber optic cable. Mr. Speaker, to further support sports development and tourism recovery, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 15.8 billion for the Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund, Kenya shilling 3.2 billion for the Tourism Fund, Kenya shilling 1.8 billion for Tourism Promotion Fund, and Kenya shilling 125 million for refurbishment of the regional stadium. Mr. Speaker, environmental protection and access to adequate supply of clean water is fundamental for the achievement of the socio-economic development envisioned by the Kenya Vision 2030. To expand access to clean and adequate water for domestic and agricultural use, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 45.9 billion for water and sewerage infrastructure development, Kenya shilling 16 billion for water resource management, and Kenya shilling 9.8 billion for water storage and flood control. In addition, I have set aside Kenya shilling 8.5 billion for irrigation and land reclamation, and Kenya shilling 2.1 billion for water harvesting and storage for irrigation. Mr. Speaker, in order to support environment and water conservation, I propose to set aside Kenya shilling 10.2 billion for forest and water towers conservation, Kenya shilling 3.1 billion for environment management and protection, Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for meteorological services, and Kenya shilling 7 billion for wildlife conservation and management. Mr. Speaker, stronger institutions and effective policy implementation and management of resource improve service delivery, transparency, and accountability. We shall continue to seek better public service delivery by building and sustaining strong, efficient, and accountable institutions. In order to enhance good governance and scale up our fight against corruption, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 3.6 billion for the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Kenya shilling 3.4 billion for the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, Kenya shilling 8.4 billion for the Criminal Investigation Department Services, and Kenya shilling 6.4 billion for the Office of the Auditor General. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, to enhance the oversight and legislative role of Parliament and access to justice, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 50.2 billion to Parliament and Kenya shilling 18.9 billion to the judiciary. Mr. Speaker, in order to facilitate the 2022 general elections, we allocated Kenya shilling 22.9 billion in the current financial year 2021-2022, and I further propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 21.7 billion in the financial year 2022-2023 to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Mr. Speaker, the county governments will receive a proposed allocation of Kenya shilling 370 billion as equitable share in the financial year 2022-2023. These represent 27.3% of the most recent audited and approved revenue raised nationally. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the equitable share of revenue raised nationally, the county governments will receive recommended conditional allocations amounting to Kenya shilling 37.1 billion, bringing the total allocation of the county governments in the financial year 2022-2023 to Kenya shilling 407 billion. Mr. Speaker, we have also complied with the High Court ruling on conditional grants to county government. In this regard, conditional grants have now been excluded from the Division of Revenue Bill 2022, unlike in the case of last financial year. I note with appreciation that this House has unlocked the stalemate on the county government's grant bills. This bill will provide a legal framework for transferring conditional grants to the county government, transfer of functions between national county government. Mr. Speaker, in order to ensure that the process of transfer of functions between the national county government is clearly provided for in law, we are developing a legislation to operationalize Article 187 and 189 of the Constitution on transfer of functions and cooperation between the national and the county governments. The proposed legislative framework will provide transparency in the administration of intergovernmental transfers in respect of transferred functions and cooperations between government. Once completed, the legislative proposal will be submitted to this Honorable House for consideration and approval. Mr. Speaker, in order to support county governments' efforts to enhance their own source revenue, the National Treasury has submitted the county government bill, revenue raising process bill, to this August House. The bill will regulate the manner in which counties introduce or vary fees and charges. Once passed, this legislation will address the problem of multiplicity of fees and charges within and across counties, in line with Article 209, subsection 5 of the Constitution. I call upon honorable members to consider and approve this bill in a bid to create a conducive environment for business and deal with the issue of multiplicity of fees and charges within the county government. Mr. Speaker, in order to support an implementation of the county government's own source revenue policy, the National Treasury is in collaboration with the Ministry of Land and Fiscal Planning, County Council of Governors, and other stakeholders have developed the National Rating Bill 2022 to replace the outdated Valuation for Rating Act, Cap 266 and Cap 267. This bill was submitted to this Parliament in January 2022, and once enacted will guide valuation for rating and imposition of rates on rateable property. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has a wealth of mineral deposits. From the financial year 2016-17 and 2019-20, the government collected a total of $5.5 billion in royalties from extractive activities. These amounts translate to an average of $1.4 billion annually. Although mineral royalties are currently being received from 15 counties, 91% of the payments are derived from extractive activities in only 3 counties, namely Kilifi, Kwale, and Kajiado. Mr. Speaker, following a presidential directive, the National Treasury has since developed a draft framework which provides for mechanisms for sharing of revenue from mineral royalties among the national government, county governments, and communities in line with Section 183 of the Mining Act 2016. The framework, which is currently being subjected to the stakeholder consultation, will provide basis for ensuring that revenues raised from the mineral royalties trickle down to the county government and communities where mining is taking place. Mr. Speaker, in line with Article 204, subsection 1 of the Constitution of Kenya, county governments have been allocated Kenya shillings 7.1 billion under the Equalization Fund in the financial year 2022-23, which represents 0.55% of the most recent audited accounts of revenue received. Mr. Speaker, following the High Court ruling on the petition number 272 of 2016 of 5th November 2019, quashing the guidelines of administration of Equalization Fund and ensuing disbandment of the Fund's Advisory Board, all expenditures of the Fund were stopped. To mitigate this, Mr. Speaker, the National Treasury, in collaboration with other stakeholders, developed the PFM Regulations 2021, which was approved by Parliament in October 2021. Mr. Speaker, following the appointment of the Advisory Board and establishment of the Secretariat, it is expected that completion of projects as identified under the first policy and the implementation of the programs in the second and subsequent policies will now be fast-tracked. Mr. Speaker, continued delays in payment of pending bills to entities that provide goods and services to both national and county government have affected liquidity and operation of these entities. In a number of cases, this has led to closure of businesses, affecting livelihoods of the suppliers. Though some progress was noted in the settlement of these pending bills by the national county government, we still have challenges where a number of suppliers are owed large amounts of money. In this regard, I direct government ministries, departments and agencies, as well as the county governments, to clear all their pending bills by 30th June 2022. In addition, we call upon all the MDAs and county governments to avoid accumulation of pending bills and ensure that payments are made as and when due. Mr. Speaker, I now want to highlight the tax policy measures for the financial 2022-23 budget, which are contained in the Finance Bill 2022. I will also highlight custom measures that Kenya will be presenting for consideration by the East African Community Ministers responsible for finance and economic affairs in their pre-budget consultation plan for May this year. These custom measures will become effective from 1st July 2022. Mr. Speaker, the proposed measures contained in the Finance Bill 2022 are expected to generate an additional shilling 50.4 billion to the exchequer for the financial 2022-2023 budget. Mr. Speaker, as earlier indicated in this statement, we consulted other partner states in the East African community, and Kenya was allowed to present its budget statement earlier than the other partner states. With regards to customs measures, we have evaluated various proposals that we intend to submit for consideration during the East African Community pre-budget consultation by the EAC Ministers for Finance, which will be held later in May this year. The measures that will be agreed upon will be communicated through the EAC Gazette and implemented from 1st July this year. Mr. Speaker, these measures are generally meant to promote our manufacturing sector and enhance our exports by making inputs and raw materials used in the manufacture of goods more affordable, hence lowering the cost of production. In addition, some of the measures are aimed at enhancing the competitiveness of locally manufactured goods through protection from unfair competition by imported goods. Some of the custom measures are also geared towards protecting of critical sectors of our economy, like agriculture, from unfair competition occasioned by importation of products that can be produced by our gallant farmers. In cases where local production does not meet our demand, the government will ensure the deficit is met in an orderly manner that does not adversely affect our farmers. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the proposed amendments under the Evaluative Tax Act. The outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing socioeconomic implications on Kenyans continue to impose a heavy burden on our health sector. In this regard, I have proposed more incentives to the sector by exempting from VAT plant and machinery for use by manufacturers of pharmaceutical products. Mr. Speaker, the government has been progressively addressing the cost of health care in the country so as to expand access to quality and affordable healthcare services. To further reduce the healthcare costs, I propose to exempt from VAT medical oxygen supplied to registered hospitals, urine bags, adult diapers, artificial breasts, and colostomy or ileostomy bags for medical use. Mr. Speaker, assembly of motor vehicles and manufacture of motor vehicle parts locally has gained traction. In order to encourage more investment, especially in the manufacture of passenger motor vehicles locally, I propose to exempt from VAT inputs and raw materials used in the manufacture of passenger motor vehicles. Additionally, I propose to exempt locally manufactured passenger motor vehicles from VAT. Mr. Speaker, charitable organizations play an important role of supporting the vulnerable members of the society. Currently, entities that make cash donations to charitable organizations that are registered under either the Societies Act or the Non-Governmental Organization Coordination Act are allowed to deduct the cash donations from their taxable income. However, entities that donate cash to charitable organizations that are not registered under the two acts are not allowed to deduct such donations from their taxable income. To address this challenge, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to allow all entities that donate cash to charitable organizations to deduct the donations from their taxable income. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has witnessed significant growth in the use of financial derivatives, including hedging, futures, and options. However, there is no provision in the Income Tax Act to charge the gains accruing from the financial derivatives to non-residents. To ensure equity and fairness, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to provide for the taxation of gains accruing to the non-residents for the transaction involving financial derivatives in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, last year, the Income Tax Act was amended to replace the previously thin capitation rule for determining taxable income with a method that restricts interest based on a ratio of earning before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. In the amendment, microfinance institutions licensed under the Microfinance Act were omitted in the exclusion list of the application for the new rule. In this regard, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to exclude microfinance institutions licensed under the Microfinance Act from the interest restrictions based on a ratio of earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization in determination of their taxable income. Mr. Speaker, next I will highlight the proposed amendments under the Excise Duty Act. The Act provides for annual inflation adjustments of the specific duty rates on all products. However, it has been observed that the adjustment may not always be appropriate for some products, depending on the economic and social environment facing these products at that time. To address this, I propose to empower the Commissioner General of KRA to exclude from inflation adjustment such products after consideration of the prevailing economic circumstances facing them. Mr. Speaker, last year, the Excise Duty Act was amended to introduce excise duty on all imported eggs. This was meant to protect local producers of eggs. However, we have noted that the tax has adversely affected the hatching business, as there is insufficient local capacity to supply all the required eggs for hatching. To address this situation, I propose to exempt from excise duty eggs from hatching imported by licensed hatcheries upon recommendation by the responsible Cabinet Secretary. Mr. Speaker, neutral spirit is an input for manufacture of pharmaceutical products. Manufacturers of pharmaceutical products, which are not subject to excise duty, are entitled to a refund of the excise duty paid on the raw materials or inputs. The processing of such refunds takes time, hence creating cash flow challenges. To address this concern, I propose to exempt neutral spirit used by the registered pharmaceutical manufacturers upon approval of the Commissioner General of KRA from excise duty. Mr. Speaker, currently, locally assembled motor vehicles are exempt from excise duty. In order to ensure the same treatment for manufactured passenger motor vehicles, I propose to exempt from excise duty locally manufactured passenger motor vehicles. This is aimed at encouraging investment in this sector and enhancing competitiveness of locally manufactured passenger motor vehicles. Mr. Speaker, gambling, gaming, and alcohol addiction have become prevalent in our society. These habits are extremely addictive and can result in a variety of harmful repercussions, especially to the youth. Advertisements for alcoholic beverages, betting, and gaming contribute greatly to the promotion of these habits. To discourage the promotion of these products and activities, I propose to introduce excise duty of 15% on fees charged by all television stations, print media, billboards, and radio stations for advertisements of these activities. Mr. Speaker, in the recent years, innovations in the tobacco industry have led to the introduction of new products beyond e-cigarettes. These products continue to negatively affect the health of our citizens. The design of these products and the taxation regime makes them easily accessible to users, including the school children and the youth, thus leading to nicotine addiction and consequently smoking and use of other drugs. In order to prevent these habits and make the liquid nicotine used in these devices less accessible to users, including the school children and the youth, I propose to change the taxation regime for liquid nicotine from current shillings per unit to an excise duty of current shillings 70 per milliliter. Mr. Speaker, in the bill, I have also proposed to increase the specific rates of excise duty for a number of products by 10% to generate additional revenue for the government. Given the recent global increase in oil prices, I have excluded petroleum products from this increase. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the proposed amendments under the Miscellaneous Fees and Levies Act. In order to promote manufacturing of pharmaceutical products, I propose to exempt inputs and raw materials imported by manufacturers of pharmaceutical products from payment of import declaration fees and railway development levy. This will encourage investments in the health sector and improve access to affordable healthcare services. Mr. Speaker, in order to support farmers who rear cows as well as pastoralist communities who depend on sale of hides and skin, I propose to reduce the export levy on the raw hides and skin from 80% or US dollars 0.5 per kilogram to 50 cents or US dollar 0.32 per kilogram. Mr. Speaker, on the amendments to enhance tax administration procedures, government agencies are expected to be sensitive and responsive to emerging customer needs. In this respect, the Kenya Revenue Authority has been on a journey of transformation to enhance customer-centric service delivery. In order to align the operation of the authorities with emerging trend, I propose to amend the Kenya Revenue Authority Act to change the name of the authority from Kenya Revenue Authority to Kenya Revenue Service. The change of the name is intended to rebrand the authority and transform its public image, thus enhance tax compliance through improved public relations and maintain a clear focus on taxpayers' needs. I have also proposed consequential amendments to other statutes which make reference to the name Kenya Revenue Authority and align them to the proposed new name. Mr. Speaker, we have noted that tax disputes take too long to conclude, especially after judgments by the Tax Appeals Tribunal. In order to protect the disputed tax revenue, I propose to amend the Tax Appeals Tribunal Act 2013 to require a deposit of 50% of the disputed tax revenue in a special account at the Central Bank of Kenya when the tribunal makes a ruling in favor of the Commissioner General of KRA, as the taxpayer proceeds to appeal the decision. I have also proposed that in case the taxpayer receives judgment in his or her favor on final determination of the matter, the 50% deposit shall be refunded to the taxpayer within 30 days of the final determination of the matter by the courts. Mr. Speaker, the Tax Procedure Act empowers the Commissioner General, KRA, to issue direction to the land registrar to put a caveat on land or restriction on the transaction for taxpayers with tax arrears. It is noted that the taxpayer may have other assets other than land which the Commissioner can put caveat or restriction on transfer to secure unpaid tax revenue. In this respect, I propose to amend the Tax Procedure Act to require registrars of ships, aircrafts, motor vehicles, and any other properties that may be used as security for unpaid taxes to restrict the disposal or transaction of these assets upon receipt of direction from the Commissioner. Mr. Speaker, the Tax Procedures Act empowers the Commissioner General KRA to request for additional information from the taxpayers in order to facilitate determination of an objection on assessment tax. The Act does not specify the number of times that the Commissioner can request for such information on a particular case. This prolongs the determination of tax disputes, as additional information can be requested severally, and any request for additional information provides the Commissioner with additional 60 days to make a decision. In order to address this gap, I propose to amend the Act to require the Commissioner to issue a decision on objection by taxpayer within one cycle of 60 days from the date of receiving a valid objection by a taxpayer. Mr. Speaker, Kenya ratified and deposited the Multilateral Convention for Mutually Administrative Service Assistance in the tax matter with the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information on Tax Matters in July 2020. Under this convention, Kenya is expected to exchange information on tax matters with tax jurisdictions that are members of the forum. In order to promote greater tax transparency among multinational enterprises, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to require that multilateral enterprises which have been operational in Kenya to report their activities within Kenya and in other jurisdictions to the Commissioner General, Kenya Revenue Authority. Mr. Speaker, the Statutory Instrument Act that became effective in 2013 provides for automatic expiry of the statutory instrument after 10 years from the date of their publication. In this respect, there are several tax-related regulations issued in accordance with the Act, as well as some that were issued prior to the enactment of the Act that will expire after the 10-year period. The expiry of these instruments will negatively affect tax administration and revenue collection. In this regard, I propose to amend the Statutory Instrument Act to exempt the tax-related regulations under the various tax laws from automatic expiry provided under the Act. Mr. Speaker, this administration has implemented socioeconomic transformative programs and a devolved system of government that required enormous financial resources. At the same time, the country was confronted by some degree of security challenges, the twin global challenges of COVID-19 pandemic and climate change, and the desert locust invasion that impacted on food security. In the midst of all this, Mr. Speaker, the government has successfully maintained macroeconomic stability, achieved growth rates above that of sub-Saharan African region, and improved welfare of Kenyans. In conclusion, therefore, Mr. Speaker, our sustained investments since 2013 have significantly transformed our economy and strengthened our resilience. Encouraged by this, our economy has bounced back, giving our people incredible optimism, even in the situation of extreme challenges. Mr. Speaker, we are proud of our socio-economic achievements and seek to sustain high economic growth so as to improve the welfare of our people. Considering the envisaged development agenda and the limited fiscal space, we have carefully balanced the difficult choices in resource allocation in order to finance the highest priorities that will propel this country to a greater heights of prosperity. I am confident that we have made the right decisions that will accelerate the pace of our economic growth. At this point, Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank His Excellency the President, Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta, for his leadership and guidance, which has transformed this country into a regional economic hub. I also thank my fellow cabinet secretaries, the respective principal secretaries, and various accounting officers and staff in all government, ministries, departments, and agencies for their support and contribution to the financial year 2022-2023 budget. Mr. Speaker, I also express gratitude to Kenyans for their rich and diverse contributions, proposals, and suggestions that helped us to finalize this budget. My appreciation goes to first to you, Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, and your counterpart in Senate, the majority and minority leaders, and the entire House leadership, including the respective clerks, for overseeing the approval process of the budget estimates for the financial 2022-23 and the related document. Second, to the honorable members of the Budget and Appropriation Committee, the Finance and Budget Planning Committee, and all other departmental committees of this House, as well as the staff of Parliamentary Budget Office, for their constructive inputs during the approval process of the budget. Third, I recognize and appreciate the management and staff of the National Treasury who have worked tirelessly for long hours to ensure that this budget and supporting documents were prepared within new timelines to enable the presentation of this budget in April, thus paving way for the August general election. Fourth, the Kenya Revenue Authority, Central Bank of Kenya, Attorney General's Office, Commission on Revenue Allocation, financial sector regulators, and the various agencies under the National Treasury and the planning for their contribution and advice during the budget process. Fifth, my gratitude goes to our multilateral and bilateral development partners for their continued technical and financial support. Further, I thank the private sector for their sustained contribution to the growth of our economy. And sixth, I wish to appreciate the media and the non-state actors for the active engagement and participation in the financial 2022-2023 budget process. Mr. Speaker, allow me to once again thank all honorable members of the National Assembly and the Senate for their support in facilitating legislative proposals supporting the government economic transformation agenda over the last 10 years. At this juncture, I wish honorable members the very best as they seek to renew their mandates with their electorates during the upcoming general election. My hope is that the electionary period will not distract us from our pursuit to solidify and sustain the economic growth trajectory we have realized over the years. Lastly, and not least, Mr. Speaker, I remain immensely grateful to my family for their love, understanding, regular encouragement, and above all, their unfailing support as I stare my demanding duties at the National Treasury and planning since my appointment to the docket. I thank you all, and may God bless you. The very last, Mr. Speaker, before I resume my seat, You recall that I've already submitted to this House the budget estimates and the Finance Bill 2022, together with accompanying documents as required by the Public Finance Management Act 2012. Today, I further submit the following documents to this August House and request that you graciously receive them. Honorable Speaker, the documents include the budget statement of the financial year 2022-2023, the budget policy statement 2022, estimates of revenue, grants, and loans for the financial year 2022-2023 budget, financial statement for the year 2022-2023 budget, medium-term debt management strategy 2022, sixth, budget highlights, the Monanchi Guide for the financial year 2022-23, and lastly, the statistical annex to the budget statement for the financial year 2022-23. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Thank you.
Honourable members, that concludes the session by the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury on the presentation of the budget highlights for the financial year 2022-2023. Honourable members, time being 4:57 p.m. It's now time for the House to rise. The House stands adjourned till Tuesday, the 12th of February at 2:30 p.m. Honourable members, at the rise of the House, members are invited for a cup of tea, including our guests and the members' ministers' parking lots.
Well, those are live pictures from the National Assembly where Treasury CS Ukur Yatani has just presented the country's biggest budget yet, Budget 2022-2023. That is going to the tune of 3.3 trillion shillings. Some of the highlights CS Ukur Yatani he started off by noting that Treasury had consulted Kenyans and Kenyans raised concerns in, among other areas, the high cost of living, unemployment, which the CS admits Kenyans have raised a concern on, as a high unemployment rate, high debt burden equally. The CS in his first statements noted that the economy is set to stabilize in 2022 at 6%, assuring the micro and macro stability of the economy. The CS assuring Kenyans that inflation is in check. The CS equally assured Kenyans of debt sustainability, given that this is one of the reasons he cited as a concern from Kenyans. The CS, of course, talked about the numbers in as far as the division of the 3.3 trillion shillings is concerned. Worthy to note in that breakdown is that President Uhuru Kenyatta's big four flagship projects among the lead beneficiaries from this year's budget, the universal health coverage getting a tune of 62.3 billion shillings. Manufacturing has been allocated 10.1 billion shillings. Food security 46.8 billion shillings. Affordable housing has been allocated in the 2022-2023 budget to the tune of 27.7 billion shillings. Among the other sectors that have benefited is the health sector, which the CS in his breakdown noted that will receive 146 billion shillings. It's worth noting that the 62 billion shillings allocated to the universal health coverage is in addition to the 146 billion shillings. The Nairobi Metropolitan Services is also a beneficiary, the CS noting that the government will channel an extra 2.7 billion shillings to fertilizer subsidiary. Remember, this has been an issue that farmers have lamented about in as far as the expense and the cost of fertilizer is concerned. This, remember, is the biggest budget to the tune of 3.3 trillion shillings. Wholesomely in division, the national government gets 62.9% of the national cake, and if that cake is cumulatively to be 100%. The breakdown of the national government and the breakdown of that 62.9% is that the executive gets 2.03 trillion shillings, Parliament 50.2 billion shillings, Judiciary 18.8%. The county governments, the 47 devolved units, are getting 370 billion shillings, accounting for 11.1% of the national cake. The consolidated fund services getting 26%, accounting for 869 billion shillings. To make sense of those numbers and the priorities, let's get a quick chat with our guest who has been in studio. CPA Wycliffe Bichanga is with me. Wycliffe, first, let me get your initial thoughts and reaction to this Kenya's latest but biggest equally budget.
What I've seen is that the CS tried to do a quick balance. It must have been very hard for him to do a general balance between delivering what Mwananchi wants and also making things happen. We can see he tried to balance and allocate money for the Big Four agenda, because I think we've always been asking that, yes, there was the Big Four agenda. What happened to the Big Four agenda? He has tried to put in money there. You can see he did something with manufacturing. He allocated the money to specific industries. For example, River Tax. He did give money for the borrowing guarantee scheme to just kickstart the manufacturing. Mm-hmm. It's important to note that when the Big Four agenda was brought to us, it was very clear that the government wanted manufacturing to contribute 15% of the GDP. However, what we've seen lately as at 2020, I think manufacturing was only 7.6%. So
contribution to the gross domestic.
Exactly.
Yeah, go ahead.
So that's a long way to go. And I think when you look at the money total allocated to this, isn't enough to take us to 15%, but I think it is a good move. Mm-hmm. When you look at the affordable housing, this has been a thorn in the flesh. He did allocate money to the Mortgage Refinancing Corporation, which is a new baby in town that is supposed to spur mortgage taking from organizations. And we hope that then it will be easy for Kenyans now to take up the mortgages and own their houses. However, what I could have expected to see, particularly with the affordable housing, is give specific tax incentives so that we are then able to encourage people. I've seen people coming up with cheaper ways of building. How can these people be facilitated? Uh-huh. Probably some tax breaks could have really helped achieve more in the housing sector. We've seen money allocated for the universal health care. That's a good move, because you cannot have a population as big as we have in Kenya and don't take care of them. As to whether this is going to be enough, we certainly know not. However, it's a good move to the right direction.
Wycliffe, for a Kenyan who was watching us before the budget statement, whose concern, as we have seen across the 47 counties, was the immediate cost of living. Does this budget and the statement Yatani has read relieve them of that pressure?
Yes, I'll say a little bit yes. For example, there was money allocated specifically to fertilizer subsidies. And remember before this, we were saying it will be very good to then allocate money specifically for the subsidies so that we can see the cost of fertilizer going down. So a little bit yes, it is going to help with Mwananchi.
All right, and it's worth to note that it is 2.7 billion shillings that the government through the 2022-2023 budget has allocated to fertilizer subsidiaries scheme. Remember, Agriculture CS last week noted of a drop in the prices of fertilizers. Getting to the Big Four agenda, Wycliffe, and talking of the president's legacy. This is the amount he will want to seal his legacy with, isn't it?
Yes. This is... I get a feeling that at some point the president may not be very keen in just the Big Four. I think when you look when you look around and see, you get a feeling that the president sort of settled on infrastructure and is keen to have that define his leadership. However, the Big Four, as they are, it will be a good start, I think, for the new government to come in and start from. Because if you think about it, those Big Four will spur and take this country to the next level.
The CS in his speech says the country's debt is sustainable. I'm sure there must have been a lot of debates recently of whether that debt is sustainable.
Yes, being the CS, I think he had to say it is sustainable, but from the look of things, it is a little bit getting out of hand. Because if you keep on adding your debt, right now you see presented a budget with a deficit of 800 million. And what we know, 800 billion, and what we know is that currently our debt stands about 8.2 trillion. So clearly, we're going to hit the 9 trillion mark very soon. If you think about it, it's not saying it is sustainable may not be very honest.
Fair enough. Towards the end of his speech, the CS thanked partners, development partners, and lenders, which begs the question: if you look at Kenya's borrowing structure and debt structure for the last 10 years. Multilateral has relatively remained at 33%. Bilateral, a slight increase of 3%. But there is a more than 100% increase in commercial, from 4% to 34%, which begs the question, why is Kenya preferring, CPA, in your view, commercial lending and borrowing rather?
I would think that when you are in a fix and you really need to borrow, you have no option but to go to the most available credit. That's the unfortunate situation. And actually, if you wanted to see whether our debt situation is sustainable, that alone is telling. Because it is obvious that concessional loans are cheaper and more preferable. But you see, you cannot wait for concessional loans when you have a need and there's no concessional loan coming through. So the fact that we've had to push further and further commercial lending clearly tells you that we at times push it to borrow and we've got to go to the most available credit. So at the end of the day, what we are saying is that it is not sustainable. We will like government to now move and start getting more concessional loans, speak more to the multilateral lenders. It will be more helpful than the commercial lenders, because that's what is really hurting Kenyans.
370 billion shillings is what Treasury has allocated to the devolved counties to aid devolution and to aid the 47 counties. In your thoughts, if you look at 370, one would say this is a lot of money getting to the devolved units, but some of the problems Kenyans have at a county level. Does it raise question of the usage of this money at a county level? Okay.
First, I think Kenya in general, we do have a problem with revenue leaks, and I think that can be addressed elsewhere. And I saw.
All right, Wakili, hold on, Wycliffe rather, we'll hold on that thought of the county governments. We have live pictures where the CS is addressing the media after the budget presentation. Let's cross over there and listen in.
If you have any question.
What would you say to someone who thinks that this budget has very little time to change the balance of high cost of living and skyrocketing this cost of
Another question? Yeah, Faisal.
My name is Gotv. The question would be basically just following up on the first question that has been asked. What is the key take home for the government who feels like whatever is coming from the government is really bogging them down with regards to even the basic needs that they need in their house? And probably this is something that might have taken care of in the finance bill that you just mentioned.
Well, thank you very much. We will share this question with my Principal Secretary, Dr. Muya. But just to assure you that as National Treasury, as the Cabinet Secretary National Treasury, we'll be listening and we have very positive feedback from the public. Kenyans are concerned about the cost of living and we effectively address this. We've addressed the issue of fuel prices, where we'll be subsidizing substantially. We've been subsidizing for the last few months, and we will continue to do it until end of June, just to make sure that the prices does not go out of reach for the common man. Number two, one very important aspect is that we are aware that food security remains a key concern for us, and that's why we have already allocated resources to fertilizer, and we have proposed further allocation of 2.7 billion in the next financial year. In this financial year, last week we've allocated 3 billion Kenya shilling, and we intend to allocate additional resources of 2.7 billion for the fertilizer to enable farmers to plant their crops in good time, to enable farmers assess, because the price has been rising as a result of global issues which is beyond the confines of this country. The second question is that you asked what will be the revenue projection that we are going to raise from the finance bill. My estimation is about 50 billion. And all of them does not touch basic commodities. They are in the luxury items. Issue of cigarettes, issue of, gambling, advertisement on gambling, gaming, betting, and all these. It will give us a net revenue of about estimated 50 billion. Nothing on basic commodities were touched in terms of tax raises. I think the takeaway from is clearly we are very concerned about the cost of living, and that's why we are addressing fertilizer, fuel prices. These are areas that we are looking at. But substantially, the price is going to remain constant and even lower, maybe for the fertilizer.
I would say that some of these proposals are futuristic. What are some of the immediate repos that Kenyans could expect? When we're talking about fertilizer subsidy, when you're talking about the fuel, some of these things might appear futuristic. What are some of the most immediate needs that your ministry and the government will be looking into to make sure that Kenyans will not continue to suffer? Some of them are even calling and saying they're buying milk at 60 shillings as of now. They're buying bread at 70 shillings as of now. What is some of the things that the government will do in the short term to make sure that Kenyans will not continue suffering this?
I think you need to realize that from your assumption, it's not only futuristic, but some of these things are challenges that have been with us for the last few months. The issue of fuel. When there's an immediate reprieve in terms of subsidy that the government will be undertaking every month, that's not futuristic. It's current and it's continuing. and we are dealing with it. Even food production, because if we plant now, using the fertilizer subsidy we've given, in the next 2-3 months, whether you are planting whichever type of crop, you'll be getting the immediate relief. And these are things that we are looking at. But also look at some areas that we've already now either zero-rated or removed taxes. The issue of pharmaceutical product, the issue of vaccine, the issue of a number of things that are well captured in the budget. But importantly, we are not able to highlight all this. But when you unpack, you'll identify the takeaway for the common man. And they are quite generous when you unpack that. Maybe the PS can elaborate more.
Yeah, I will elaborate on the point about the takeaways and add to what the Honorable Cabinet Secretary has said. Number one of the things that we have covered in the speech by the Cabinet Secretary is the question about pending bills. Because pending bills constitute a reduction in liquidity. And so by urging ministries, departments and agencies to make sure that they pay all the pending bills is to make sure that there are resources that are going to be available so that where businesses are hurting, there is a solution for them in terms of more resources being made available. I just also want to add on the issue of us addressing the issue about fuel. And it is something that is ongoing now, and the effects are going to be felt immediately, even during the budget period. And so we have listened to what Mwananchi has said by the time that we crafted the budget, and we have taken that into consideration, because indeed we want this to be a very participatory process. Thank you.
There are two of you now. I don't know whom to listen to. Okay, you.
What do you make of the accusations that this hope and jumpstart two processes outlined in the law, thereby ending up making this an event rather than a process?
My opinion is and the funding that we will for the airline has been one like that happen, and are we going to make an exception or the need that the airline?
Yeah. I just want to your question. As National Treasury, we do not just come from anywhere and go to Parliament. It's a process of due consultation, and we have the necessary approval from the Speaker, who is the head of Parliament. All the necessary process, steps, procedures have been duly followed. And we had actually even sought to seek authority or support and understanding of the rest of the East African community so that we can present our budget earlier because of election. And this is not the first time. Last election, as we are going to the last election, we also did the same. All the necessary process documentations were duly submitted to the National Assembly, discussed, debated. The budget policy statement, the debt management strategy, all these documents were forwarded to Parliament in good time, and therefore all the necessary processes have been followed. On the issue of KQ, Kenya Airways is a very strategic investment. We are not only looking at the flight, but we are looking at other auxiliary investments that come up with it, including, the export of flowers, including as a regional hub, Kenya as a diplomatic headquarters for the region, all these, and also the connections from here to the rest of the country. And by having it remain afloat, it's going to complement other business activities in this country. And so it's one institution that we cannot afford it to die. That's why we are supporting it, but we are doing it from the perspective that we must streamline, including the cash injections. We are not just giving money for the sake of it, but we want to make sure that there are certain reforms that are effectively and painfully undertaken, including reducing the number of flights, including even the number of staff, but also looking at the general governance structure, the streamlining, so that they remain not only accountable, but also relevant in the competitive business environment.
When I see in your speech you said in the bill, I have proposed to increase the specific rates. You have said in your speech that you have proposed to increase the specific rate of excise duty for a number of products. What are these products that you're increasing by 10% to generate additional revenue for the government?
Okay.
You're a bit vague with that.
Yeah, that's why I wanted you to unpack those within the finance bill. These are basically nothing to do with essential products. They are all targeted items on luxury. They have really nothing to do with the general population of this country. You would ask about the amount of allocations. You know, the allocation we've been doing for the last, even this current financial year, and the reform process comes out with a package. We've already identified a transaction advisor. They have come up with an elaborate roadmap in terms of what needs to be done and the costing of the same, and the same have actually been onboarded in the budget. Last one. Yes.
We just have 2 months to the end of the financial year. What do you have like county government are waiting for 150?
Foremost, I think as you understand well, we have a budget, we have allocation, but also depends the flow of revenue that we generate. Sometimes we fall behind by a month or so, but to a great extent, unlike 2020, most of the counties we are within. Maybe if there's a delay, it's about 1 month. But what has been happening is that we have a number of counties, significantly over 50%, who are just stocking their money in their accounts, but the movement is not there. Huge balances that's not moving. And we are just wondering, when there are other competing priorities in terms of funding or projects that are quickly moving, we give projects a priority to those areas. And those counties, quite a number of counties are up to date, but there are a number of counties that are not making any moves in terms of the balances at the central bank, their own individual accounts. Money not moving is because of their inability to implement projects within the timelines required. So we are urging them also to spend their money so that they can continue receiving the disbursement as required. But we are aware that on average, we have not funded up to about a month. There are a few counties up to 2 months. And the 2 months are those counties that are not utilizing their money. Last one. Can you raise your voice? What's wrong with it? I can't hear you well.
Speak up. Speak up.
I'm saying under revenue projections, we indicated that there will be an increase from 1.1 trillion to 2.4. Maybe how should that be possible, given that we know we are heading to an election cycle, which tends to affect the business environment. And secondly, under the allocation of the economic stimulus program, we've allocated 2.1 billion for youth empowerment against 5.8 for improving the environment. Why, knowing that the youth, there's a serious concern on the youth, but you've allocated them 2.1 billion and the economic stimulus program and 5.8 billion for improving the environment?
Maybe I'll also ask my peers to come in. Almost, I want to assure you that we do not just come up with numbers. We base it on projections. The Kenya Revenue Authority has been doing very well in terms of surpassing their targets. And based on those projections and the economic activities that's going to abound next financial year, we are confident about raising that amount of resources, at least reaching the target. You know, this is going to be a different kind of election. It's a transitional election where the incumbent is not going to be running for an elective office. So we expect stability to continue. And at the same time, we are not anticipating any disruptions of the economic process. Business are going to continue to blossom. 2020 things were very rough because of the constrained business activities, the containment measures that have affected these. But we are expecting seamless, economic activities, and as a result of these, we expect to hit the revenue target as required. Regarding your second question. The 2.1 billion on the Kazi Mutani, these are basic engagement, the youth within mainly the informal settlements, within the urban centers. But the 5.8 in terms of support, these are activities that are actually going to also be done by the same group of people. But they are towards achievement of water security, achievement of road construction, like now substituting machine for labor, like maybe doing water system. So even part of this will be in form of employment, like let's say construction of classrooms, where Kenyans are going to get opportunity to now supply products, supply building materials, construction of desk. So through this, there is that interconnected stimulus that's going to be created across the country. But the 2.1 for the Kazi Mutani specific, where now youth are going to be engaged in clearing drainage, dealing with issues of hygiene within their settlement, working on the social projects. But even the other one is partly going to contribute to general employment. I want to... Yes, you want to say?
Yes, one last question. Even as you ask us to unpack the finance, can you assure Kenyans that it is a Mwananchi budget?
I confidently assure you that this is a Mwananchi-friendly budget. No surprises as you unpack the finance bill. You will see for yourself that whatever we are proposed to do is for the greater good of the Kenyan public. The issues where we are raising taxes are things that have been a social problem to our community. Look at the issues of gambling. Look at the issues of betting. Look at the issues of advertisement for alcoholic products. Can you exactly say that socially they contribute revenue, but they do not contribute the social fabric of communities. The Kenyan youth are very fragile, and therefore they need to be protected from too much exposure in terms of those social vices that are going to derail not only their education, but even their health. Thank you very much.
Okay, wait.
I don't know what is running with it. Good. I just